All right, it's 6 o'clock, and we are a timely organization. And so we want to go ahead and get started. Once again, welcome tonight to our Virtual Advocacy Day 2022 workshop. I am Pastor Scott Onquit, the Policy Director for Faith in Place. I'm joined this evening with Christina Croce, our Senior Policy Coordinator. And again, if you can be so kind to place in the chat your name and the city that you are representing, if you're representing in Illinois, and even if you're out of state, please mention that also. Great. Let's see where we have people. All right. That's Sean, Chicago, Samantha, West Side. Okay. All right. I see multiple locations. Fall Kelly, Champaign. Again, Elizabeth, Chicago. Thank you. And Berger, Urbana, George, and Glenwood. Wonderful. Thank you. So many of you are representing different parts of the state, which we love. We love to have great representation. We are a statewide organization, and so we like to reach all parts of the state. So again, welcome to our webinar tonight on the Advocacy Day 2022. And we are super excited. Before I go ahead, I just want Christine to say hello so you can hear her voice, and then I'll jump right in. Christine, you want to say hello tonight?
Hi there, everybody. I'm Christina Croce, and I'm sitting in East Central Illinois this evening. And thank you so much for joining us.
Great, great. I just happened to be in Springfield today, and Christina was here with me earlier. And so we were excited about being in Springfield because we have such important pieces of legislation to get past this legislative session. But today's workshop, we're going to talk about Advocacy Day. So what will Advocacy Day and Advocacy Week of Action look like? We're going to talk about what we're advocating for, and then we're going to have some time to practice with a partner. One thing we found out is that you have to have a good elevator pitch when you're trying to push a bill or even ask your legislator for information or possible engagement. And so we're going to talk about that. But before we talk about that, let's talk about Faith in Place's mission. Many of you have heard about Faith in Place. Faith in Place empowers Illinois people of all faiths to be leaders in caring for the earth. We provide resources that educate, connect, and advocate for healthier communities. And we are excited about the work that we do because we know that it impacts so many lives. Now, Faith in Place's vision, we are diverse people of all faiths, and I repeat, all faiths, leading the environmental movement towards justice. You'll hear that a lot. You'll see that a lot in our on our website. So please keep that in mind. Advocacy. Now, one thing I've learned in the work of advocacy, there's only so much that one can do as individuals or even individual houses of worship. So we try to promote collective efforts to make sure that our advocacy efforts are far-reaching. So we must change policies and systems to create the world we want with clean air, clean water, and again, healthier communities. So you heard me talk about people of faith. People of faith are a powerful force in change. We have gone down to Springfield multiple times in multiple years to challenge the systems that stand, and we have been very successful with passing legislation that promotes clean air and clean water. And that picture there just happens to show you some of our efforts during Advocacy Day. So the most effective advocacy is done on issues you are passionate about. Let me just repeat that, because you're not going to advocate for anything that you're not passionate about. When you start thinking about where your passion lies, that's where your advocacy is driven. And so the most effective advocacy is done on issues you are passionate about. And we're going to get a chance to look at some issues tonight, and hopefully you'll be able to connect to some of those issues. So before we go any further, I want to kick off with a poll. And the poll is, how experienced are you with advocacy? 1, I'm new to this. 2, I've done a little advocacy. Or 3, I am an advocacy champion. Please apply or respond to the poll. And let's see where you fit in there. Wow, this is good. You have a good mix. All right, everyone had a chance to respond? Well, great. All right. So let's see how it responded. Okay, so 30% said I'm new to this. Great. We love the newbies. We love the newbies. Great, great, great. 57% I've done a little advocacy. Great. Always room to grow. And then we have 13% who are advocacy champions. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to, you teach this class right now. No, just kidding. All right, but great. We're glad that we have some diversity in the room. And so now I'm going to bring again Christina Croce, who's the Senior Advocacy Policy Coordinator, and she's going to take us through some stuff around our policy platform. Take it away, Christina.
Thank you, Pastor Anque. So you are seeing, kind of for the first time, perhaps, Faith in Place's policy platform. This is the way that we show who we are. This is the way we determine what we get involved in, what we're passionate about. And so you can see that there are 6 major areas that Faith in Place has identified as, areas that we want to do work in towards justice in our communities, and these would be statewide. So you can see there that we have environmental health. It might be kind of small for you, so I'll read them. Environmental health, climate change, clean water, economic justice, food access, and voting rights. So these are the areas that we care about and we want to work on. And so in each of those areas, we have, more information that we can learn about how we've figured out why these are so important to us. So if we start with environmental health, we know that the problem in Illinois is that, environmental pollution impacts communities all around our state, all around our country. And that it leads to deaths, it leads to illness, it leads to, all kinds of issues in our communities. And so that's a problem. And as people of faith and justice, we want to do something about that. And so we believe that people should live in healthy communities. We believe they should have access to green space. We believe they should have healthy soil and clean air and clean water and fresh food. We believe that people deserve to be protected from environmental hazards and have access to decision-making in their communities. When they see an impact in their community, they should have the decision-making power to fix the problems that they see happening in their communities. And so, this is a matter of justice to us. And you'll see that some bills that we'll be advocating for this week at Lobby Day on Friday are directly related to our environmental health policy platform area. You will see in the chat where you can find the policy platform items that we're talking about today. And I hope that you take some time to look those over, but we're going to go over them just kind of super fast right now. So when it comes to climate change, we believe that future generations deserve a livable climate, have access to healthy land, healthy oceans, don't live through extreme temperatures or stronger storms or wildfires or droughts. And we believe that we can actually be a force for change in fixing some of these problems. And so we believe that this is a matter of justice, and we believe that people of faith should be speaking out in ways that they can to fix this crisis. And so, lost my page here. So climate change is one of our areas of our policy platform. Why don't we go next to the water policy platform? So we believe that people should have clean water. We know that water is life, and it's the lifeblood of our communities. There's a reason why communities kind of sprung up around water sources, clean water sources, because it's the lifeblood of your community. And so we should not only have access to clean and safe water, but we should also have access to homes that don't flood when it rains too much, and that we should have the infrastructure that we need to make sure too much water isn't causing a problem either. And we know that our water can become contaminated for a number of reasons. We also know that lead service lines, we have the most in the country in Illinois, and that those will need to be replaced. And so those things are all a matter of justice, that communities of color are often impacted most by these kinds of issues that impact drinking water. Low-income communities also suffer. And so as people of faith and justice, we need to speak out when we can advocate for policies that lift up clean water and say, this helps our communities. When it helps one community, it helps all of us. Let's go to, what one is on the screen? Food access. So we believe that all people should have easy and affordable access to healthy and nutritious food. That seems like a simple statement, but here, as I sit in East Central Illinois, that is not the case. Even in the most, fertile farmland in all of the world, there are people in my community who don't have enough to eat, or who don't have fresh food to eat. And I think that might be the case in a lot of our communities. And so part of what we do with the food access platform is to, look at the history of discrimination and systemic racism in communities that has led to the problems with food access. We also want to look at, poverty and why that has led to a lot of folks having a hard time accessing food. And so the solutions here would be, making sure that we're building sustainable food networks in our communities that, maybe think a little more outside the box than they have, when we were growing up, right? And there are some bills that we'll be talking about later that are directly related to the food access issue as well. Okay, let's go to the next area. What's the next one? So voting rights. Now this one, sometimes I hear folks say, well, what does this have to do with environmental justice? You're an environmental justice organization. What does this have to do with that? And I would say that when people have the ability to speak up to their elected officials, that's a voting rights issue. When they don't have the ability to speak up to their elected officials, that is an issue of all kinds of justice, environmental included. And so every US citizen should have the right to cast a vote easily during an election. Thankfully, Illinois is not one of the states that's trying to make it harder for you to vote right now, but there are many places in the United States where that is the case. And so we need to be vigilant about our voting systems and the ways that people get to vote. There will be a bill that we're going to talk about later on this evening that's directly part of our policy platform about that. And I think, all right. So all of our policy platform areas have to do with justice, have to do with the environment, have to do with places that we are passionate. And each one of those requires us as people of faith and justice to speak up to our legislators and hold them accountable, which is what advocacy and Advocacy Day are all about. So some ways that you can hold legislators accountable would be visiting with your elected officials. This year that looks like Zoom meetings, or perhaps if we can't get meetings with our elected officials, sending them letters. Town hall meetings is another way. Sometimes that starts with an elected official saying they want to host a town hall. Sometimes that goes the other way, and there's a group of constituents who say you need to hold a town hall on this. So that can go both ways. Phone calls and emails and letters to legislators are very important as well. Their offices have to keep track and log every one of those, and so they do make a difference. Witness slips is a cool thing that Illinois does that not all states do. So sometimes you will see, especially if you're one of those people in that middle part of the graph that you've done some advocacy in your lifetime, you might get emails from time to time that say, will you fill out a witness slip for this particular bill? And then you go online and you type in a few things and you basically log your either support or your opposition to a particular bill. And those things get counted and looked at during committee meetings where legislators can see, oh, there is some public either momentum for this bill, or, you know, there's some public dislike of this bill. So those things do matter to legislators when we're looking at bills. Op-eds and letters to the editor are also ways that we can engage and hold legislators accountable. And social media engagement, which has been happening throughout the week during our week of action, which we'll talk about a little bit more too, is also a way to hold legislators accountable. So as you can see, there are a lot of different ways that we can hold our legislators accountable, not just one. And as we kind of move into some of the bills that we're advocating for today, I just wanted to remind us that we've had some wins recently, kind of a big one, in the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act that was signed into law September 15th of 2021, very recently. This was a bill that lots of environmental organizations worked on for many years, about 3 or 4. And we were able to make it happen because of our consistent, constant advocacy with our legislators and the work of some really smart, really great folks in the environmental spaces that were able to help make this bill happen. So with advocacy, good things can actually happen. So what is Environmental Justice Week of Action, and what are we expecting to happen this week? That's probably why you came here. So we will have a rally at noon on Friday, February 18th. And I believe a registration link has been dropped in the chat already. If you have not been registered for that, you can get registered for that this evening. You will be having legislative meetings probably sometime on February 18th, but that might depend on your legislators' availability. And so you have a lobby captain, more than likely, or a team leader who's been connecting with you about what time your meeting might be. So if you're unsure about that, you could maybe see Pastor Anque or myself, and we could be able to get you connected to your lobby captain if you've not seen that. And then there are calls to action on social media happening this entire week. And you can see in the chat, I believe, the toolkit for that. When in doubt, if you're not a big social media person, you don't know what to write, you can always retweet what Faith in Place or Faith in Place Action Fund puts out there to help get the message across about what we're trying to focus on for our social media each day. And if you've already registered for Advocacy Day, you've received all of these materials in your email. And again, if you have not, we should be able to help get you connected sometime today. One last thing for me is that, so Faith in Place has a sister website, which is called the Faith in Place Action Fund. faithinplaceaction.org is where you can find our policy platform that we just looked at, but it also tracks the different bills that we're watching that align with our policy platform. So when you go to the faithinplaceaction.org website and look at our policy platform, you'll see a tracker that tells you if it's a state policy or a federal policy, and there's going to be a way to take action. There'll be a petition or perhaps a fact sheet or maybe even both for that item. So most of what we talk about here today is all up on that website. So if you forgot about what we talked about today, the website you want to go to is faithinplaceaction.org/policy platform to be able to find all of this information in one place. Now, Pastor Anque, what bills are we advocating for on Friday?
Great job, Christina. Thank you so much for taking us through our policy as well as why we advocate um, and why does it matter. But we are excited that we're looking at 4 different bill areas this week. One, the Environmental Justice Air Permitting Bill. This bill speaks directly to the level of pollution that gets in the air. And we know that on the southeast side of Chicago, we have been fighting against a relocation of a polluting plant called General Iron. And this bill would directly affect how a plant like that will be able to operate in environmental justice communities. Also, we want to protect coal communities. We realize that as coal plants are closing down, there's coal ash and residue from these plants. And we know that it has affected not only the land, but also the water. And so we're going to be looking at a bill that's going to protect the water that comes from Lake Michigan, especially in that area of Lake County. Speaking to one of the state representatives from that area, she said it's atrocious that they did the cost analysis and they weren't so concerned because they didn't feel it was that many lives would be lost because of the waste and the poison to the water. And so then also we're going to look at the seizure workforce fix, just some language fix. I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. But we know that one of the exciting parts of the big piece of legislation that just passed, the Climate Equitable Jobs Act, was these 13 workforce hubs and entrepreneurship hubs that are going to be located throughout the state. Now, the funding from that comes from the ComEd bill, and there needs to be a language fix there to make sure that the funding actually reaches the programs. And then voting in prison, again, everyone should have the right to vote. And we really want to talk about this piece of legislation that will allow people to vote right where they are, even if they don't stay in that community. They will be a part of the process as they move forward. So let's talk about this EJ air permitting bill, HB 4093 or Senate Bill 2906. So it defines environmental justice areas in a way that recognizes cumulative impact and allows community to determine their status as such. That is super important because many people actually live in an environmental justice community, but are unaware they live in an environmental justice community. So we need to first allow people to recognize that they're actually in an environmental justice community. Now, when you talk about an environmental justice community, these communities have already historically been disenfranchised and already have suffered the effects of pollution. They have higher asthma rates, higher death rates, and it has affected their communities tremendously. So we want to get a fix out there that does not allow polluting plants to continue to pollute those areas without any cost. So it expands public and community participation by requiring public hearings for permits under consideration in the impact community with oral and written translation services available. That's something we found out right now. This is why we're living it today. The General Iron hearings, the communities that are being affected, many of those residents, English is a second language. And so we need to make sure the proper translation is there so they'll understand everything that's happening when a company like General Iron is coming into their community. Allows any person or community to file a complaint and provide standing to challenge a siting permit in court. So again, we have to have the ability to fight for our rights. And it creates a project bank in environmental justice communities for those that have violated pollution laws to ensure that projects are guided by the community. Again, we have what they call habitual polluters, habitual offenders. It needs to be on record that they are habitual polluters so that when we challenge them in court, we'll have the proper documentation and records to know that this is a valid challenge. Then it requires an assessment for cumulative impact for any new pollution source in EJ areas. Now, keep in mind, environmental justice communities will benefit from this because it will not allow polluters to just drop into their communities without any resistance. This is important. So protect seizure workforce programs, again, HB, House Bill 4390 or Senate Bill 3866. So now that we passed this nation-leading, equity-centered climate policy, and everyone knows that I was a champion for the Climate Equitable Jobs Act, there are some next steps for moving forward. One of the things is to make sure that the funding is there. We don't want to overpromise and then underdeliver. And so there was a language fix that needed to happen. And so we have instituted a bill that will correct that language so that the 180 million that was negotiated for the bill will be there to support the bill. And that's being actually championed on the House side by Representative Marcus Evans, which is a South Side rep. And then on the Senate side, Representative Castro, who was one of the chief sponsors for the seizure legislation when it was being passed. And then voting in prison. This may appear controversial, but it's not as controversial as you think. SB 828, restoring voting rights to roughly 28,000 people in Illinois prison post-conviction. So again, we want to make sure that people post after their conviction, they have their rights to vote restored. Of those incarcerated, 55% are Black and 43% are between the ages of 18 and 35, which is really a constituent that we're looking at as our future voters, because those are younger voters and they have things that they care about. Now, you remember, for those of you who have seen me teach a class around equity and justice, you'll know that I often quote this alarming percentage that 55% of people in prison are Black when we are only 13% of the population. So we know that there's some disparities there. And so that voting block needs to have representation. A history of discriminatory voting practices in combination with the current effort in some states to make casting a ballot more challenging often disproportionately affects communities of color. We do know that, we've seen that, whether it's limiting voting by mail, limiting voting hours for early voting, voter ID or stringent voter ID practices. We know that affects, in a high degree, people of color. 95% of the people in prison return to their community. So again, just because they're downstate in prison, they're coming back to the families that they left. And so when they come back, we want to make sure that they're able to vote and exercise their right to vote without any difficulty. People who feel heard, represented, and connected to their communities are less likely to harm their communities when they return. I have a piece in the process. My voice has been heard. I've been able to cast my vote. This is why we want to make sure that we have this a historic piece of legislation passed. So protect cold communities. Again, House Bill 4358, Senate Bill 3073. Current laws do not go far enough to protect Illinois communities from the impacts of even coal plants no longer in use. They close, but they don't want to clean up their mess. They've hidden their mess in the ground, and they know the cost of cleaning that up will be costly. And so they've done cost analysis to see how costly it would be. And they feel it's too costly to save lives. And this is a shame. And so we're not going to allow this type of action to continue in the state of Illinois. I was speaking to one of the chief sponsors of this bill, State Representative Rita Mayfield today, and she says that their own language has indicted them. So there's a clear example of this was the disastrous implosion of the Crawford coal plant in Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood. We saw that in films, and smoke went all over that community, which coated the community in hazardous dust. Additionally, with new coal plant retirements like that in Waukegan, we need to ensure we have a plan for safe demolitions and cleanups and a just transition for those communities. So it requires increased notice and public hearing to communities when a power plant will be torn down. It requires the removal of coal ash at the coal plant in Waukegan, which many of you may know, Waukegan's water source is our beautiful Lake Michigan. And those toxic coal ash residues are polluting the water source that comes from beautiful Lake Michigan. And so I'm going to let Christina talk about this because I gave this bill to her because she has children in school. And so, again, advocacy is where our passion lies. And so, Christina, take it away about better school lunches.
Thanks, Pastor Agway. So yes, I have 3 school-aged kids, a high schooler, a middle schooler, and an elementary schooler. They have opinions about school lunch. And as maybe some of you are parents, you might have had some opinions about school lunches, either when you were in school or when you watched your kids go through school. So what I've learned about this bill, and this is not a bill that we're advocating for during lobby day. I just wanted to bring this one to our attention because I think it's important. And this one, again, when we talk about passion, we talk about, something that's really important to us that we can advocate for. This might be one that you want to mention at another meeting at another time, or even write a petition sometime soon to your elected official. But Illinois is one of like 2 states, I think New York is the other, that requires schools that participate with a national school lunch program to accept their food contract based on the lowest bid by price, which is basically a race to the bottom of, what a provider will give you. It's going to be the lowest quality food. And so this is by statute what schools have to do. They have to take the lowest bid. Well, as you might imagine, lots of school districts would like to do lots of different things with their school lunch program. They would like to perhaps purchase local produce from somewhere near their school. They would maybe like to be able to home cook in their kitchens and hire staff to do that with high quality ingredients. Maybe they want to give some thought to culturally relevant foods for their communities. Right now, they can't. So this bill would fix that statute so that bid price cost is not the only factor that they can consider when bidding out their school lunch program, their vendors. So you might start to see some social media or advocacy around this coming up really soon around the school lunch issue. Like I said, my kids have opinions about what they eat at school, canned food versus fresh food. And it's a justice issue, it's a quality issue, it's a health issue. And so Faith and Place is happy to be part of the different organizations that are going to advocate for this bill. So we have a poll now. You've heard the bills that we are going to be advocating for, plus a bonus bill about school lunches that I'm just kind of excited about. So we would like to know which one you are most passionate about. And this will help you as we go to practice in some breakout rooms here momentarily. So which one of these bills are you most passionate about? Think about it.
While they're doing that, that bill, the school lunch bill, is being sponsored by leader Jahan Gordon Booth, which is a Central Illinois representative. And I would love actually to have a webinar on school lunches. And so I'm going to work on that, and we're going to see if we can get her to come on and have some food experts, because I just believe that that's something that we should be advocating for. Mm-hmm.
So I'm watching this poll go by, and I'm seeing not many people pumped about coal plant demolition. Consider that you might have a coal plant in your community that would, that are all going to be on the chopping block by 2045. So that one might be more important than you think, sooner than you think. All right, so let's take a look at the results. So it looks like we are pretty passionate about environmental justice, air permitting, and for good reason. Coal ash is another high area of interest and passion. And then protecting the workforce programs and the voting in prison are both tied at about 11%. So again, we're getting you to be thinking about where your passion is here, because we're going to talk about practicing with a partner here in just a minute, or a small group of 3, your pitch, or what you're going to say to your legislator if you are able to get in a Zoom room with them on Friday. So Pastor Anque and I were in Springfield just today, and we were standing at what they call the rail, which is where you can kind of congregate outside of the chambers while the House or the Senate members are going in and out. You have 3 seconds to get their attention, and that is no exaggeration. And so I tell that story because you have to have something short, sweet, quick to grab a legislator's attention about why you want to talk to them about this particular bill. It's really important. And so we practice. That's why we're going to do this. We want to share perhaps a personal story of connection about why this is really important to you, why it might be really important to your community. If you live in Lake County and live near these coal ash ponds, or live near the coal plants that are about to be demolished here soon, tell your legislator about that, why it's important to you. If you have a loved one who's incarcerated and it would be really important to them to be able to have voting rights, tell them about that. Those personal stories absolutely matter. Pastor O, did you want to add anything else about this pitch?
Sure thing. Again, if you have family members with asthma, that's a good connection to the air quality bill. Also, please keep in mind that you may be asked for the bill number. And so you heard me say HB something something or SB. Those are the bill numbers. All bills are assigned a number. And so if you are asked that number, it's probably good for you to have the number on the, at the top of your mind so that you'll be able to share that. But again, you don't have long to do your pitch. That's why we're going to practice. But a personal story and what issue you're most important about or most passionate about is super important. So I'm going to allow our team to break you out into breakout groups. And when they break you out, again, practice with each other, say, and allow one to be the representative and you be the pitcher, and then the next, and then try reversing roles and see if you can practice again how to get your attention. And so if you do not know your representative's name, make up a name. It doesn't matter. We can connect you to your representative by just getting you to fill out a petition. And we'll let you know who your representative is. We'll let you know who they are, your state representative is, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so we are going into rooms now.
Okay, I see some questions in. And I apologize, you might hear my dog barking.
I'll jump on one of the questions. It says, I will be meeting, this is from Jacqueline Edie. Will I be in a meeting with my legislator, with others, or all alone? And you will actually be with others as a group. So your legislator is scheduled for a specific time to meet with all those that are part of their district. And so when they join, you will be a part of that. So again, have your questions ready so that you will be able to get your question in, and there will be space for questions and answers from your legislator after that person talks about, their position, so forth and so on. And you'll be able to do your minute speech, or I call it elevator pitch.
I'll also mention, I'm sorry, Pastor, I'll mention too that sometimes a legislator in a meeting will ask you a question that you absolutely have no idea how to answer. Instead of making something up, say, I really don't know, but let me write that down. And I would love to follow up with you, or I would love to have someone follow up with you. Whoever is leading your lobbying team We'll have a form to fill out after the meeting, and that is where they'll capture that kind of information. If this legislator needs to be followed up with someone who has a little more expertise in the particular bill, someone can follow up with that legislator. So those kinds of things that happen during those meetings, like, oh, I've never heard of this bill, or who's the sponsor, or well, what about this part of the bill? If you don't know, write that down, or have your team captain write that down, and someone will follow up with that legislator later.
Yes. Okay, so a question from Liz, and it's a great question, actually. How many people are on average are in a Zoom call with your legislator? And that really depends on how many registrants we actually have for that day, and how many actually join with their legislator. And then the second part of the question is, are we expected to fill the 30 minutes with the legislator if we are alone? Absolutely not. You will not have death by silence. If after you have had your conversation with your legislator, and if there's nothing else to talk about, you can easily end the meeting. So again, and listen, I was worried when we broke out just now, because I only had 3 people in my group. I said, I hope we don't have a lot of silence, but I had a very engaging group. But I'm always concerned about that. It may go, you may have too much time, but again, no, you can get checked out. But thank you. That was a great question, though. Let's see. I have another
Pastor
meeting.
O, I see a question in the chat about what the 2 words in the CJA funding fix for the workforce programs. Can you speak a little bit more about that, perhaps?
The 2-word fix is, and it's funny how it has to be framed. Likely bill payer and bill payer. So it's just that, likely bill payer and bill payer. Thank you for adding that in. So it's really just have to fix the word likely bill payer and bill payer in order to make sure that we get the monies directed, so that corporations in specific can easily opt out because they actually pay less on their bill than we do, believe it or not, even though their bills may be more. But when you think about kilowatts being used, they pay less. And so less money will come from them. And so that's why we had to make sure that language fix is there, so that those corporate entities would be paying their fair share like everyone else.
And those 2 little words are about a $80 or $90 million difference.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly.
It's critical that that's fixed.
Good question, though. Mm-hmm.
So Valerie wants to know, how is it possible to advocate for so many bills at once? Might it ever be better to focus on 1 or 2? Typically, we focus on no more than 4. And 2 of those bills had kind of gotten combined into 1 bill. So it's kind of like 5 bills, but it really is technically 4. This is, again, why we focus on that idea of what you're passionate about, because you might not have enough time to get into all of them. So lead with what you're passionate about. That will always show through, better than if you try to badly explain a bill that you don't know much about, right? So lead with the ones that you're passionate about. And the conversation usually flows pretty quickly from there, as Cindy put in the chat, that, sometimes the 30 minutes with the legislator is easily filled with a legislator just talking. So you just never know.
Christina brings a great point. I mean, I may have these 4 bills for this week, but Christina can be a witness that I was really talking about 2 bills today. So, 2 bills that I know that I'm my CJA fix bill, because I'm pushing that bill personally, and then actually I was pivoting to school lunches because the representatives that I kept running into were from areas of the state I thought could benefit from that conversation. So again, depending on who's your audience, really that's how the conversation goes. So yeah, but these are smaller bills compared to the last lobby day that we had 1 big bill the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which now is the Climate Equitable Jobs Act. And so it really depends on the season that you're in. But there's hundreds and hundreds of bills that are actually floating through various committees on a daily basis during a legislative session. Some of them you will never hear about. They'll never get out of committee, nor do we care about them because they don't really attach to our policy platforms or to our interests. So you'll never hear us talk about those bills at all, even if they get passed.
All right, so I see that we're coming up on time here, and I wanna, there's still some good questions in the chat, and I wanna direct your attention again to some of the other links that Faith in Place has dropped in the chat as well. So make sure you check those out and put those in your browser before you log off today. But you know, a lot of these questions kind of are saying the same thing. Will you have someone who can speak, kind of be the lead speaker in the group? Yes, that could be your lobby team captain. Your lobby team captain should be connecting with you about setting up perhaps a pre-meeting to discuss some things, or maybe say, here, you're going to talk about this thing, and you're going to talk about this thing, and you're going to talk about this thing, so that you have like a game plan and you're not just kind of talking over each other at the meeting, or no one's talking. So check with your team captain if you've heard from them so far about if you can get together before your call, your Zoom call, to maybe troubleshoot some of that. The other questions kind of have to do with how do we get the word out about this? How do we let our people in our houses of worship know, who care about these things, but maybe don't know about Faith in Place or Faith in Place Action Fund? You know, how do we let them know? You share the Faith in Place website and the Faith in Place Action Fund website, you know, with them. There's a lot of language in there that kind of explains why people of faith should care, what the problem is, how do we solve it. It does a lot of the language work for you, so you're not stumbling over, you know, trying to explain this to somebody. So I'd strongly encourage you to share out all of that information. If you've registered for Lobby Day already, you should have received all of this, all of the bill fact sheets and some information through that registration. It's just through access on a Google Drive folder. So you should have a lot more information there if you register for Advocacy Day for, you know, these particular 4 bills.
And Jacqueline Edie said, when will we hear from the team captains? You should have heard something already. If not by tomorrow, then reach out to one of us and we will try to find your team captain to reach out to you. So our email addresses are there on the screen. Please reach out to us. If you do not hear from your team captain by tomorrow, say 3:30, 4 o'clock, please reach out to one of us and we'll try to get in touch with your team captain because we want to make sure that you are a part of the process. And thank you for your interest in being a part of the process. And so with that being said, it's 7 o'clock and we are very timely people. And so we're going to end our webinar on Advocacy Day. I hope that I see you on Friday during the rally at 12 noon. It will be a blast. Thank you again, Christina. Thank you to our comms team for doing the backup and keeping us on pace. We really appreciate Lauren, and thank you to our Faith in Place teammates that joined. We really, really appreciate you. And then thank you to each and every one of you tonight for being a part of this most important advocacy webinar. And I pray that everyone is well as we close out, and everyone have a good night. Bye now.